Good afternoon. Thank you to WRI for giving me this opportunity to present my views. I'll be talking about MSMEs, emissions and carbon markets. Next, please. Um, Taking the cue from the previous speaker, we know that India has actually, in its Paris Declaration, said that it would reduce its carbon intensity by about from 30 by 33 to 35%, and we are on paths to attain that goal, of which the industrial sector has a share of 58% in total energy consumption, and the MSMEs contribute about 13% of global annual final energy consumption. And as of for MSMEs in the context of India, that is about a 1/3 of all the emissions that is coming out of the industrial sector. Um, MSMEs contribute about 8% of India's GDP and about 45% of overall industrial output. Next, please. So the framework for doing this is basically, I'll be looking at what are the energy efficiency policies in SMEs, what are the practices, how energy saving has been achieved in the industry, what are the carbon footprint labelings that labeling options for them, whether energy audits are being conducted, and financing options for low carbon projects. Next, please. So on the left panel, you can see the policies that are specific to the MSMEs in India. Most importantly, what we have is the ZED certification scheme, the zero defect, zero effect scheme. And then there is the credit linked capital subsidy technology upgradation scheme. Apart from that, there are 2-3 other schemes, the PRSF, the VCFEE, and of course, the lean manufacturing competitiveness. The focus in all of these cases is basically target a cluster of MSMEs and look at how or offer incentives for energy reduction and energy efficiency. On the panel on the right, you can see that these are the schemes that are there for the industrial sector in general, starting from the NAPCC and PAT, etc., which I'm sure the speakers who will come after me will be talking about. Next, please. So what is the rationale for the energy efficiency practices in MSMEs? On the right, you can see that there are essentially 3 kinds of questions. First is identification of the process in each industry, then the industry-wide mapping of the best practices, and finally the identification of the low carbon pathways for each. And in the presentation made by WRI, some of these have been laid out also for the, it is the same for the large industrial sector. But for the MSMEs, there are some specific questions that needs to be asked, and these are the questions that are given there on the left. So specifically, what are the energy emissions that are being cut, whether it's the upstream or the downstream supply chain? Who makes the decision? What motivates them? How do they think or they set the priorities? Who influences the decision makers? And what policy tools or programs will influence the decision makers? And how will these programs work? And this is very important, particularly in the case of MSMEs. Next, please. So the map on the right that you can see basically gives you a sense of where the large energy consumers are. So the dots that you can see are red are the highest. And so there is, for example, a cluster of textiles in Gujarat. There's a textile cluster also in Tirupur. The orange dots are the ones which are lower in energy intensity. But so this basically gives you a map of all the SME clusters and their energy intensity coded according to the color, with the red being the most energy intensive. Now, the practices that are there in the system are basically carbon footprint labeling, which has just been started according to some reports. Energy audits are conducted for the SMEs, and but most important of all is how do SMEs actually finance these. And there are a couple of options that are there: the green bonds and the GCF, etc. And IEA, in fact, has said that India would need about 2 lakh crores on an annual basis to improve energy efficiency. But this includes not only SMEs, MSMEs, but includes all industrial entities. And finally, the status of what is the status of the low carbon technologies for SMEs. Next, please. So if a market is developed for the carbon in the SMEs context, it should basically have 5 of these criteria or the elements, which Megha has also spoken about. It could be a clustered cap and trade kind of an approach, where the coverage would be based on the regions, on the clusters of SMEs. It could have a sectoral allowance and trade, where the coverage would be based on specific industrial sectors. It could be a energy or pollutant mechanism based, which is basically an extension of the PAT scheme for the specific SME sectors. And the objective here is energy conservation. It could also be a goal-induced offset program, where the SMEs become the suppliers of credit, and it would be based on the CDM mechanism. And finally, it could be a development credit, or where the SMEs could get development credits for energy intensity efficiency achieved by them. Next. So where would SMEs actually, how would they do this? And right now, the industry is in a very nascent stage as far as SMEs is concerned. We heard from Megha that for the large industrial outputs, some of that has been attempted. But as far as SMEs are concerned, it is, I think, it's still in the drawing board stage, and it hasn't gone much beyond what has been envisaged so far. But then the essential point out here is that one needs to deploy renewable energy as far as possible, and this would be the good option for reducing the GHG emissions. A monitoring system is needed basically to record industry-wide fuel consumption data. While this is there for the large entities, for SMEs, the data is scattered because it is basically generated on the basis of surveys conducted on particular clusters, and we don't have a sense of all the SMEs clusters in the country. And basically, this would also help in reducing or firstly identifying what the carbon footprint is, and then reducing the carbon footprint. And the targeting could be done is that even within the SME sector, the energy intensive sectors are picked out first to increase, and their energy efficiency is increased. Now, the low carbon pathway will, of course, vary from industry to industry, and I'm sure the speakers who come after me will be talking about their experience. But as far as the total production costs are concerned, energy accounts for about 15 to 50% of the total production costs for SMEs. And so it means that the reduction where it is 50%, there is a huge potential for reduction of production costs too. So finally, due to COVID-19, most SMEs are in a very bad shape. Working capital is a problem, and finance definitely would be a problem. Most of the SMEs are actually self-financed, about 90, 80%, 87% are self-financed, and some of them may actually postpone operations, if not basic operations. So as undertaking any kind of energy efficiency or any kind of low carbon path would actually maybe postponed for much future till this pandemic is over. Thank you for your attention. I will stop here now.